morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome once again to the Bourse Report. It's been some time that I've stood here before you, and it's good to be back. So Road is off on some vacation, but he'll be back next week, God willing. So today what we are covering is the JMMB Additional Public Offering. Many clients and many investors have called to us to get our view on this additional public offering, which opened on the 22nd of October and is due to close on the 11th of November, as you would see on your screen, subject to any earlier closure by the issuer, which is JMMB. So let's talk a little bit about what the issue involves, and then we can speak to our view as to the APO by JMMB. So we look now at what's been happening with regard to the configuration. And you would see here on the screen that there is provision for several types of investors. The first being key investors, that would be institutional investors. The second, existing shareholders and team members. The third would be non-reserve shareholders. And then those are the persons who are neither existing shareholders nor key shareholders. And provision has been made along these lines to make allowances for participation by the various parties from a minimum amount of 266 million shares up to a maximum amount of 325 million shares, provided that the issuer wants to essentially upsize the issue during the time of its remaining open. Now, the key investors would get a price of $1.90 TT, and that would be the same for the team members. But the non-reserves, that would be persons who are investing in the JMMB stock for the first time and have no JMMB shares. It would be at a price of a little bit more of just $1.94 TT. So I want to just spend some time looking at a peer review comparison, JMMB to the rest of the market. And what you would see, they would count in a grouping which I would call the non-bank financial grouping that would be listed on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. We'll come to that in a moment. But what I can say to you, that most of these investors, in terms of their capital base, it's about $3 to $4 billion TT. By way of comparison, these players comprise JMMB and some merchant, Sagicor, and we put in JMMB here with some of their various variations that they are looking at. So let's talk about it in terms of one aspect, price to earnings. What we see is on the JMMB side, the price to earnings, whether pre or post the issue of the shares, is somewhat higher than the rest of the field, which is 15.4 times or 15.7 times, as the case may be. And what this essentially means is that the price to earnings is a bit higher, therefore valuation metrics should be essentially, or ought to be, somewhat less attractive, only looking at this ratio. When you look at Guardian 7.2, Sagicor 10.8, and some merchant 13.8. What next? Well, let's look at another comparative with the peer group. And trailing dividends are a bit on the lower side relative to Sagicor and some merchant and Guardian holdings. So you would see trailing dividends 3.2% in the case of Answer Merchant, 3.4%, and in the case of Guardian, 3.9%. 1.3% in the case of JMMB, meaning that they have been paying less in terms of dividends relative to price, probably for expansion purposes, retaining for expansion purposes. Thirdly, if you can go to the next graph, the JMMB share price has been growing at a more than reasonable pace. When you look back in 2016, December here, it was 86 cents and has continued on average to rise, closing at $2 at the current time or thereabouts. So there is a good price history for the stock. So what are the things that recommend the stock then to investors? As we try to get to the next graph. Well, essentially, JMMB in its growth is also acquiring 22% of Sagicor Financial Corporation, provided all the regulatory aspects are settled. One would recall that the Sagicor Financial Corporation is going to morph into a company that is no longer listed in Trinidad and Tobago or Barbados, but would be listed on the Trinidad and Tobago, on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and traded in hard currency, Canadian dollars. So that's one of the areas that investors who have a challenge to access hard currency from Trinidad and Tobago can look at. The other factor is that you would see that JMMB is in fact some technical problems at the back, but let me continue. JMMB, in terms of its acquisition, in terms of its growth, has positioned itself to expand out or have participation in the expansion from its own domicile to other domiciles that are operated by Sagicor or the new Sagicor. So there is the opportunity for participation in that earnings stream as it comes forward. There are a number of other factors. The company, JMMB, has claimed that it expects growth by plus 20% by 2021 in earnings, and that will bring down some of those PE multiples that we've been talking about from 15.7%, the multiples 15.7 down to about 13.4. So on the face of it, while some of the peer review metrics might not be as strong relative to peers, what we are seeing, opportunity for access for Trinidad and Tobago investors, good long-term story as Sagicor itself expands, as well as JMMB expands. Our view is that it is a good stock for the medium term, and it's a good entry point in terms of the JMMB APU. Look at our website for more detailed information on this particular piece that we have been doing, and look for our information with regard to our mutual fund provision, with regard to our repo provision, and with regard to the Bourse trader, which allows you access internationally for both equities, bonds, and other alternative investments. Give us a call at our numbers or reach us at our other contacts. This has been Subhas Ramkhelawan for the Bourse Report.